David Benjamin Keldani, former pastor. David Benjamin Keldani, author of the book Muhammad in the Bible, Uncovering the Mystery of Muhammad. I hope that this writing, as well as subsequent writings, can show that Islamic teachings regarding divinity and the last great messenger of Allah are 100% correct and in accordance with the teachings of the Bible. David Benjamin Keldani, who was born in 1867 in Urmia, Persia, was originally a Roman Catholic priest from the Unaite Chaldean sect. In fact, he was one of the most respected figures among that sect. He received education from childhood in that city. From 1886 to 1889, 3 years, he was on the teaching staff of the Archbishop of Canterbury's mission to Assyrian, Nestorian, Christians at Urmia. In 1892, he was sent by Cardinal Vaughan to Rome, where he studied philosophy and theology at the Propagandified College, and in 1895 was ordained a priest. In 1892, he wrote a series of articles in the Tablet on Assyria, Rome and Canterbury, and also in the Irish Record on the authenticity of the Pentateuch, namely the 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He also has several translations of the Ave Maria in different languages, which were published in Illustrated Catholic Missions. David Benjamin Keldani, church leader. While in Constantinople on his way to Persia in 1895, he wrote a long series of articles about the Eastern churches in English and French in the newspapers, a daily published there under the name The Levant Herald. In 1895, he joined the French Lazarist Mission in Urmia, and published for the first time in the history of the mission a periodical in the regional Syriac language called Kalalazio Shara, Voice of Truth. In 1897, he was sent by the 2 Unaite Chaldean archbishops of Urmia and Salmas to represent the Eastern Catholics at the Eucharistic Congress held in Paray-le-Monial, France, under the leadership of Cardinal Perraud. Of course, this is an official invitation. The paper read at the Congress by Father Benjamin was published in the Chronicles of the Eucharistic Congress of that year, called Le Pèlerin. In that paper, the Chaldean archpriest, as he was officially called, deplored the Catholic educational system among the Nestorians and predicted the imminent emergence of the Russian priest in Urmia. In 1888, Father Benjamin returned to Persia. In his hometown, Digala, about a mile from the city, he opened a free school. The following year, he was sent by church authorities to take charge of the Diocese of Salmas, where a sharp and scandalous conflict between the Unaite Archbishop, Kudabash, and the Lazarist Fathers, which had been going on for a long time, threatened to lead to schism. Last sermon. On New Year's Day 1900, Father Benjamin delivered his last and memorable sermon before a large congregation, including many non-Catholic Armenians and others, in St. Khorovabad Cathedral. George, Salmas. The preacher's subject is the new century and the new man. He recalled the fact that Nestorian missionaries, before the advent of Islam, had preached the teachings of Jesus, the Gospels, throughout Asia, that they had many institutions in India, especially on the Malabar coast, in Tartary, China, and Mongolia, and that they translated the Bible into Uyghur Turkish and other languages, that the Catholic, American, and Anglican missions, although they have done some good for the Assyro-Chaldean nation by elementary education, have divided that nation, as in Persia, Kurdistan, and Mesopotamia, where there were already numerous hostile sects, and that their efforts were destined to bring about final collapse. Consequently, he advised native people to make sacrifices in order to stand on their own feet as true human beings, and not depend on foreign missions, and so on. In principle, the preacher's words are 100% correct, but his words offend the interests of God's missionaries. This sermon immediately brought in the apostolic delegate, Mamyuster Lesne, from Urmia to Salmas. He remained Father Benjamin's last friend. They both returned to Urmia. A new Russian mission had been held in Urmia since 1899. The Nestorians enthusiastically embraced the holy Tsarist religion for all of Russia. The 5 great missions, American, Anglican, French, German, and Russian, with their universities, a press supported by rich religious circles, consuls, and ambassadors, tried hard to persuade about 100,000 Assyro-Chaldeans to convert from heresy. A Nestorian, to one of the 5 heresies. But the Russian mission soon surpassed all others, and it was this mission that in 1915 prompted or forced the Assyrians from Persia, and also the hill tribes of Kurdistan, who had then moved to the plains of Salmas and Urmia to take up arms against their respective governments. As a result, half of his followers disappeared in the war, and the rest were driven from their hometown. Real religion? The big question that has long been festering in this pastor's mind is now approaching its climax. Is Christianity, with its many forms and colors, and with its inauthentic, false, and distorted sacred texts, the true religion of God? In the summer of 1900, he retired and lived in his tiny villa in the middle of the vineyards near the famous Chalibulagi fountain in Digala. There, for a month he spent time in prayer and meditation, reading over and over again the sacred texts in their original texts. The crisis ended. He resigned officially by sending a letter of resignation and openly explaining to Mar Tuma Audu the reasons for relinquishing his priestly functions. All efforts made by the clerical authorities to overturn his decision were in vain. There were no personal disputes or animosities between Father Benjamin and his superiors. All of this was just a matter of self-awareness of the beliefs he held, and began to grow weakly in Father Benjamin's heart. For several months he was employed in Tibris as inspector in the Persian Post and Customs Office under Belgian experts. Then he was assigned as a teacher and translator for Crown Prince Muhammad Ali Mirza. In 1903 he once again visited England, and there he joined the Unitarian community. In 1904 he was sent by the British and Foreign Unitarian Association to deal with education and information problems in his village community. On his way to Persia, he visited Constantinople, and after holding several interviews with Sheikhul Islam Jamaluddin Effendi and several other clerics, he converted to Islam. After converting to Islam, the father changed his name to Abdul Ahad Dawood. Fulfilled prophecies. Several years later, he wrote a book, after which he carried out in-depth research, especially into the linguistic aspects of the Gospels. At the beginning of the article, namely in the introduction, he stated, "I hope that this article, as well as subsequent writings, can show that Islamic teachings regarding divinity and the last great messenger of Allah are 100% correct and in accordance with the teachings of the Bible. I will devote this present paper to reading the first point, and in several other papers I will try to show that Muhammad was the real object of the covenant, and in him alone was truly fulfilled all the prophecies of the Old Testament." Prof. David Keldani, pastor who discovered the truth of Islam. I cannot attribute the reasons for my conversion to Islam except to the guidance of Allah Rabbul Alameen. Without God's guidance, all the lessons or knowledge, discussions, and other efforts to find straight beliefs might even cause people to go astray, said Professor Abdulahad Dawood B.D., former high priest at David Bangamni Keldani, Iran. Pastor David Benjamin Keldani B.D. was his name before converting to Islam. He was a Roman Catholic priest from the Uniate, Chaldean sect. He was born in 1867 in Persia and grew up there. Since childhood, he has been educated to be prepared to become a priest. David was even sent to Rome to study theology and philosophy. David became an active pastor. He produced many religious works. He even often writes about the church in various media. His achievements as a priest were also very brilliant. David was even sent by the two Uniate Chaldean archbishops of Urmia and Salinas to represent Eastern Catholicism at the Congress in France. But in his old age, he experienced inner turmoil. It started when there was a dispute between the religious sects he adhered to. He even encountered bloody disputes. So big questions were racing through his mind. He wondered about the variety and color of the religion he adhered to. This diversity made him question the authenticity of the holy books, and even God. So in the summer of 1900, while he was enjoying retirement in a villa in Digala, David began his path of guidance. He reread his book, then meditated. He looked for answers to all his questions. Until later, when he moved to Belgium, he rejoined the Unitarian community. David and the community also visited Istanbul. There he met a cleric named Jamaluddin Effendi. After many conversations with the cleric, David received his guidance. He found the truth in Islam. David also converted to Islam and changed his name to Abdulahad Dawood, Islam as a way of life. David felt that the guidance he received was very valuable. He couldn't even understand why his heart was inclined towards Islam, remembering that since childhood he was trained to be a priest. If asked why he chose Islam, he really felt he had received guidance from Allah. David felt very lucky to have received God's guidance. After converting to Islam, David became a devout Muslim. He studied Islam seriously. He even felt calm and peaceful after converting to Islam. Everything that Islam teaches, he applies in his life. In the remainder of his life, he made Islam his way of life. And for a moment I believed in the oneness of God, be his messenger. Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is my character and way of life, David said gratefully.